in as well. But, that's it, recording.
Okay, thank you. Any more questions in public session around agenda item 10.6? No. Okay, just to formalise then.
Sorry, convener, I thought I put my hand up. Has it not come up?
I think it's up now. It seems the hands seem to be slowing up and down in my screen. Yes, Councillor Bolton.
Thank you, convener. It was just on page 231, table 1 and 2, where it showed the differences of whether the children from King's Wells would be zoned or zoned out. Do we have the actual numbers of children that are attending from King's Wells? Because it just didn't seem particularly high, that was all.
Okay, do we have an answer for that?
I convener. Oh, sorry, Mrs. TS can maybe pick that up.
Thank you, convener. It's just I don't have specifically the numbers at this point in time, but something that I could actually supply to Councillor Bolton.
It would be helpful. It's just that obviously I'm assuming that we provide them transport to go over to Bucksburn currently. Is that correct? Because there's not a direct bus service from King's Wells to Bucksburn. You'd have to go. I'm assuming we provide school transport.
I guess it depends on the distance away, doesn't it?
Well, I think it's got to be on a public transport route.
Convener, I think Mr. Jones knows a bit more detail around that issue.
Oh.
Mr. Jones? Is Mr. Jones there?
Are you with us?
Apologies, yes, I was muted. Thank you, convener. It would depend upon the individual circumstances of individual pupils, but certainly any pupils that live out with the 3 miles safe walking distance would be provided with transport to Bucksburn. Just on your earlier question around the numbers, it's worth pointing out that at the point at which King's Wells is rezoned to count as Wells, it would be a gradual impact on Bucksburn Academy, because we wouldn't be looking at moving all King's Wells children immediately out of Bucksburn Academy into the new school. It would only be any new pupils that are leaving primary 7 from King's Wells would start to attend the new school. Any pupils already at Bucksburn are likely to remain at Bucksburn until they finish secondary school.
Okay, and I assume there would be, through you, convener, a zoning exercise to do that, a rezoning exercise, I should say.
That rezoning exercise has actually already been undertaken, and approval has been given, so that zone is ready to go live, if you like, once the new school is in place.
And can I just ask? Sorry, it's just obviously the new school that we're considering them going to isn't in place. Is there any sort of timeline in terms of how long that's live?
Convener, I think I said at the start of the meeting that the initial scoping and development work for that, along with the community campus, would be reported back later this year, and within that we would hope to be able to firm up timelines for a future committee to approve or otherwise.
Sorry. Yeah, sorry, Mr. Booth. I think I was confusing here. I just meant actually it was sorry, through convener. The timeline in terms of how long your sort of rezoning exercise is done. Is it just done? It doesn't have an expiry date, is what I'm meaning, if the new school's not in place.
I'll just check what the expiry dates are for you, and we'll come back to the committee on that list. Excellent.
Thank you. Thanks, Mr. Booth.
Okay, any further questions? Okay, I will be moving a change to the recommendations, if they could be circulated now, Mr. Masson.
Okay, I'll arrange that.
Okay, so has everyone had time to read those recommendations? Linda, be moving anything different to those?
Convener, we'll be looking to move the officers' recommendations as is.
Okay, and do I have a seconder for moving my recommendations? Councillor Grant. Councillor McCrae, do you have a seconder?
Yes, he does.
Councillor Yule. Okay, I will be moving the recommendations that I have put out here today. You know, we are noting the sorry, Councillor Nicholl, can you go on mute? So thank you. We're noting the update in the planner that a report will be brought back in March, outlining the process and timeline for delivering the school estate strategy. You know, it is. We live in a strange time just now where we don't actually know whether this will affect our school estates in the long term, you know, whether we'll have to make changes to that. So I think it's only right that we would wait to see what the new Scottish Government guidance will be on that. And I think it's taking that into account, it would be foolhardy to agree to the extension of Bucksburn Academy until we have more information. That's why we're saying it shouldn't be referred to the council budget setting process in March. But we are actually instructing the Chief Officer of Corporate Landlord to look at what is needed in the short term for the school, and to review the forecast, the school forecast at Bucksburn Academy, and to see what is needed to deliver education in the short term. Councillor Grant, anything you want to add on that?
Yeah, thank you, Convener. I'll keep it brief. Firstly, just to offer my thanks to Maria and her colleagues for the work done to date, Mr. Booth as well, in relation to this work. There has obviously been a lot of work gone into this report and the business case that's been presented. I agree with you, though, Convener, that I think there is maybe a little bit more work that is required to be done. And recalling Councillor McCrae, who'd said earlier in the committee that with merit, I add, that the Scottish Government couldn't have predicted certain aspects of a pandemic coming to affect the world and affect the country and Aberdeen. I think there's perhaps some unknowns if we want to make sure and carefully make sure that we get this right for Bucksburn for the short, medium and long term in a strategic and integrated way, that we have to bear in mind the points that you have raised in point 2 around about the potential long-term impact of the pandemic on the way that our young people learn in City and in Bucksburn Academy. So yeah, I'm happy to leave it there. I think we have to wait a little bit, wait for the report to come through, as has been noted in one, allow for a better understanding of how the pandemic will affect the way in which our young people will learn, and how what our facilities need to be to reflect that and to meet those potentially changing needs. So very happy to second you, and just finish off by saying I think there's certainly no question of our commitment to make sure that we get this right for the young people and the entire Bucksburn Academy School community as we go forward.
Thank you, Councillor McCrae.
Thank you, Convener. It's just to move the recommendations as is. I fully trust the officers in what they're saying in this report to note that the school will be quickly overcrowded if we do not act. So I'm not wishing to go into any lengthy reasoning why. It's just to formally move off the back of what the officers are telling us.
Okay, Councillor Yule.
Thanks, Convener. As I said, very happy to second Councillor McCrae and agree our officers I think, very sensible recommendations. I was somewhat surprised to hear your comment, convener, that agreeing these recommendations today would be foolhardy, given that they are our officers' professional recommendations. I'm sure you weren't calling our staff's recommendations foolhardy, and I wondered if perhaps you might like to reconsider that comment, particularly given your remarks about Councillor Rattay's remarks earlier on. But I think, yes, the pandemic is going to have an effect on everything. It is having an effect on everything. But equally, we can't hit the pause button on long-term projects like this, and this extension will be required. That I don't think is under debate, and I would really just urge the committee to agree to the recommendations to proceed with this project, because it's in the best interests of the young folks. Thanks, convener.
Thank you, Councillor Hugh. And we'd like to join debate. Councillor Lang.
Thank you very much, convener. I'm happy to support the motion that you've put before committee today, because I think it's a sensible approach to adopt. I did actually observe the Education Operation Delivery Committee when the matter was discussed, and I know from the discussions there and the questions that we've heard from officers today, and the answers that officers have given in relation to questions, that there are a number of pieces of work that are currently ongoing, which will feed into the school estate review and the shaping up of education as we move forward. And I did used to be the convener of education, and I took, I think, the last school estate review through the process, and I know the work that goes on behind the scenes around that and the amount of information that has to be gathered together. I think what we do have to bear in mind is that the pandemic has changed things significantly, and it may well be that the way that education is delivered in this city and indeed throughout Scotland will be changed as a direct result of the COVID situation. So when we're looking at things like the community campus model, when we're looking at the senior phase, when we're looking at the school estate review in its entirety, it's important that we're bearing all of that in mind. Now, I did ask some questions in private session in relation to the finances, and obviously won't go into that, but it was clear that when we drew up the finances around this, that was, as always, you have to take a point in time, but it's a considerable period of time since those figures had been pulled together. And I think we have heard today from other members of the committee concerns that they may raise around funding being in place that will be able to support capital projects, and making sure that when we determine that funding, that it is accurate and it's going to cover the costs of the project. I'm not convinced that that is the case with the figures we've currently got here. I'm also not convinced around the long-term future. I fully accept that officers are bringing forward this, and it clearly says it in the report. They see this as being an option that would deal with the short to medium term projected figures for the Bucksburn area. But that short to medium term is only 5 to 7 years. And given the capital outlay that we are talking about here, not just the capital outlay, but the incurring revenue costs that we'll have, because we must bear in mind this is a 3R school, which we have a unitary charge that has to be paid up until 2039. There are significant costs in relation to that if the extension was to go ahead. Now, I fully accept that we need to look at how we deal with the projected figures for the Bucksburn area to ensure that those who will be educated at Bucksburn now and in the future will have the best education that we can possibly provide. But we must look at the financial aspects of that to make sure that that money is being channeled in the right area, or could we utilise that money to better effect to provide other outcomes. So I think it is important. I think Councillor Bolton also asked some questions around the house building projects, because that is playing very much into the figures and the role forecast that we've seen within the report. And I think we've seen throughout the city, the COVID situation has significantly impacted on house building. because of the shutdown in construction, but also around the changing economy that we have. And so all of these things, I think, need to be taken into account before we make a final decision on this. So I think what you are proposing within your motion is the way in which we need to go, and but also we need to make sure that we are shaping up plans for that short-term issues that officers have flagged up. And so recommendation 4 within your motion does that, and I think it's the right way for us to go. So I'm happy to support the motion that you've laid down before us today. Thank you, convener.
Thank you. Councillor Bolton.
Thank you, convener. I will be supporting you. Much of what I was going to say has already been said by Councillor Lang, and it basically is around the whole schools estate. I think we've got a school at Price that's not that far away. I think we need to understand how Bucksburn plays into the whole schools estate strategy. My concern was it's a very tight site, and schools are not just about classrooms, they're also about recreational space, about providing canteen facilities, an awful lot more than just about classroom spaces. And I have concerns that it might not be big enough. And it is, as I say, it was built probably too small to start with. That was before my time. However, we've got what we've got. It is a 3-hour school, but I think the most important thing is we don't want to disrupt children's education. So making sure that what we build is fit for longer than just 5 to 7 years, I think is really important. I think that's why it's really, really critical that we look at this in the round as part of the schools estate. And given that the update to the planner is suggesting there's a report going to come, the council meeting in March, I think I'd rather see what that said before making a piecemeal decision today. So I'll be supporting you, convener. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Moving to summing up, Councillor McCrae. Oh, Councillor Nicholl. No. Councillor Nicholl, did you want to come in?
Most certainly, thank you. Quite simply, I'll be supporting Councillor McCrae today. No great surprises there. I've also served on school committees for a very long period of time, and goes back in my experience to the School Closures Appeals Panel set up by the Scottish Government. So I do think, you know, when we have a school role that is being brought before us, it's something we have to give very careful consideration to. And on this occasion, it's because the school role is heading for full. In fact, it could be argued that the school role is full now. Now, whether or not the building continues apace or at a slower pace, it is going to continue. And therefore, there is going to be more pressure placed on the school role. The quite simple answer to this is we need to be progressing with this matter. The only thing that's going to happen is we're going to delay, we're going to see increases in costs, and we're going to have to take even more measures because the school is going to be even fuller further down the line. It's quite disappointing that today in the Aberdeen City Council we have an education committee where we have a number of non-elected members who are able to contribute hugely to the debate around our schools. And when we come to this committee, we don't appear to be listening to that expertise. Expertise from teachers, from parents, from religious reps, as well as the political representatives of the council. They have supported it, and I think we now need to go and also support their decision. Quite simply, that there will always be things that happen in the schools estate, but the city is continuing to grow, albeit maybe not as fast as we had anticipated before, but the role will continue to add to the pressure on the school. And I think our officers are more than able to deal with the challenges that are coming along, whether that is in terms of us having the issues in and around how we deal with campuses and community campuses, That is always going to be changes that are coming along in education. It's a very dynamic area, and our officers are more than capable of dealing with that. What we have here is a simple piece of very basic arithmetic where we're getting too many kids going into too small a space and it's coming down the road fast. The simple arithmetic is to refer this to the budget process and to move on and let our officers deal with all the other issues that are coming along in education as we progress and provide schools that are fit for the 21st century for the children in our communities. And that's what this would do. Thank you very much, Convener.
Councillor McRae.
Yeah, thank you, Convener. Not too much to add what's already been said by my colleagues. The Education Committee, the education officers have come forward. This is what they're looking for. This is what they need in terms of the school capacity. So I'm really, I cannot fully support us going away and supporting your amendment, Councillor Lumsden. We need to trust what our education officers are saying and move on with this project and get this extension done.
Okay. Thank you. I think in summing up, I think the most important thing I've heard during this debate is from Councillor Grant, getting it right in the long term. And that's exactly what we need to do. And that's exactly why we need more information before we're making a decision. I would argue that, when this school was built, people didn't get the long-term decision right. They weren't looking far enough ahead to see how the role and would change and what new developments were coming on stream. And I think that's why we find ourselves in a situation just now where we are considering an extension that, when you look at the cost per additional place that it's going to bring, adding in the unitary charge, adding in the capital cost, is an amazing, a huge amount of cost. And I think it's only right that, the world is changing. We've got the campus model coming through. There's a lot of work now being done online, and we may want to embrace that in the future once we're through this this pandemic. So it's only right that we get that information back. It's only right that we get more information back about our school roles, how that's going to change from the shock, the economic shock that the city's had over the last 12 months. So I think it's only right that this is not progressed just now. We get more information. We get the proper school estate strategy that will come back, and then make an informed decision at that point. So that's why I've put forward what I have today, and it's disappointing that not everyone can support me, but hopefully I can get the support required for this to carry. Can we go to the vote, please, Mr. Masson?
Thank you, Convener. The committee has before it a motion in the name of the convener and an amendment by Councillor McRae. Please vote motion or amendment. Convener?
Motion.
Vice Convener?
Motion.
Councillor Bolton?
Motion.
Councillor Cook?
Amendment.
Councillor Lane?
Motion.
Councillor McRae?
Amendment.
Councillor Nicholl?
Amendment.
Councillor Houghton?
Motion.
Councillor Ewell?
Amendment.
The motion is carried by 5 votes to 4.
Okay, moving on to agenda item 11.2 now, the external transportation links to Aberdeen, South Harbour and Wellington Road. I don't know, Ms. Beattie, do you want to introduce this report, or do you want to just go to questions?
I'm happy just to take questions.
Happy to take questions. Any questions on this report? Councillor Ewell?
Thank you, Convener. Apologies if I have missed this in the very substantial and detailed report. But in terms of the expected completion date for the harbour works, how does that compare to the expected completion date for the road link works? And if there is a gap in terms of the roads taking longer than the harbour to be completed, what, if any, interim measures would we be planning to put in place? Again, apologies if I've missed that in the report.
I don't think you have, Councillor Yule, but Ms. Beattie, you want to?
Sorry, convener, I was having technical issues there. I'll bring in my colleague, Mr. Neil, just to answer that one. I would say that obviously it is a long process in terms of getting any new piece of infrastructure, such as a road like this, in place. But we are very mindful of making sure that we are making sure that the projects run together.
So who's coming in, Mr. Neil?
Yes, I'm going to come in.
Yep.
Yeah, the road scheme itself is associated with the city region deal, funding up to 2026. It is, as Gail described, likely to be quite a long process to get this road in place. It'll take a number of years. The harbour is due to open within the next 12 to 18 months or so. So there will be a gap. It's anticipated that what was coming through in the planning application in terms of roads is what will be in place to fill the gap in the short term between now and when the road goes into place in a few years' time.
Okay. Councillor Grant, did you want to come in on that?
Thank you. Yeah, just to follow on from that, I was fortunate enough to have a chat with Mr. Neil before committee, so thank you for that. It was really helpful. I suppose my only question is just in terms of the interim measures that you refer to, how you'll engage with local members. I did have a chat with Councillor Duncan and she was very eager to be able to have the opportunity to engage in part of that, just to make sure that the surrounding area is sufficiently mitigated and traffic can continue to flow.
Thank you, convener. Just to remind everybody that in terms of the traffic movements that were put in place to do with the construction of the harbour, those are following that same route that's in option 4. So we the intention will be to try and ensure that that is maintained, and we're hopeful that there'll be a shorter gap as possible, but absolutely we can keep local members updated on that.
Thank you, and just again a thanks to Mr. Neil and Ms. Beattie and all other officers involved in this huge piece of work. So very well done.
Maybe I can just pick up on something Councillor Yule said, Ms. Beattie, in terms of, I still consider myself as a fairly new councillor, but and this is quite a long process, but could have it been any faster, or is this just the how long it takes for to go through a stag process and then for the road to be built?
Thank you, convener. As a known roads engineer, I can share your pain sometimes. But what I would say, and what I've been really impressed with, is just about the thoroughness of that process and the fact that it takes into account so many different aspects of the infrastructure project. So yes, it is lengthy, but it's lengthy for a reason, to make sure that that process is as thorough as possible when you've got such a significant infrastructure investment. Okay,
sorry, Councillor Yule.
I'm sure you weren't suggesting this, convener, but can I just emphasise I wasn't criticising anyone. Yes, you're not that new anymore, so you can't keep playing that card. But I do appreciate that the whole process, it takes a long time. Anybody who's had any connection at all with the Brigidee process will realise how long the whole stag exercises can take. My concern was about the what the sort of gap we were looking at between the harbour completion and the roads completion, and what would happen in the interim, because obviously the traffic has to go somewhere, and that would have an impact on neighbouring communities.
No, Councillor Yule, I wasn't suggesting you were. I wasn't suggesting that you were suggesting it was slow at all. It's just that I know when this is discussed at the city region deal, there's often some let's say, members who are members of that committee who are slightly surprised by how long the process takes. I was in no way suggesting you were criticising the process.
I am greatly reassured. Thank you.
Councillor Nicholl.
Thank you very much, Convener. And if I can start by thanking Mr. Neil and Mrs. Beattie. I've had conversations with them both, Miss Beattie, over quite a long number of time to do with this project, and it's been most helpful. Obviously, you know, option 4 is the option that's coming forward from the STAG process as the preferred option. And there was a considerable amount of funding was offered for access or to help with access to the South Harbour, given that it was a strategic development. I wonder if you could just clarify for me. Obviously, as things stand at present, we have the Coast Road, which is a reasonably narrow piece of roadway that undulates and is certainly used by some people as a late for work route, shall we say, if they're travelling north into the city or south at home time. And the junction for Hareness Road is going to see a lot of heavy goods vehicles. Are we looking at realigning the priorities there so that the lorries won't be stopping? It will be the cars giving way to them on the Coast Road, some kind of junction. Would that be the plan?
Mr. Neil?
Yes, that is a plan for that option, is to realign the priorities at Hareness Road from Coast Road North into Hareness Road. So that is the plan for that. We would also be reviewing that whole length of road to see whether there's any localised improvements or widening required along its length.
Thank you, Mr. Neil. I think from Hareness back towards Burnbutts is okay for present requirements. I think it's going north from Hareness. We might have to do some widening, but do we actually have control of that land? Because I think that's actually going past Dooney's and the waste plant. So is that actually within our control, do we know?
We don't envisage having to impact on the waste plant. There may be some impact on Dooney's. We're not sure yet. I mean, part of the next stage will identify exactly what we're going to require in terms of land requirements. Certainly option 4 is the one that has the least impact of all the options on land, but there's still likely to be some impact.
I think it's fair to say, Convener, that these aspects will be picked up in the next stage. These are the sort of the matters of detail that will come forward as part of the actual road design.
Thank you for that. Obviously, the next one is there has been considerable concern raised by the two communities, both Tory and Cove, in respect of obviously the construction work and HGVs passing through residential areas. Now we're speaking here about putting in a purpose-built access. I did allude earlier there was a substantial amount of funding had been earmarked as a potential for this. Would officers have plans to bring forward mitigations that would minimise HGV or large vehicles passing through these residential areas, such as Tory and such as Langdykes Road, which are already caused or have caused a problem during the construction phase?
Through you, Convener, that can certainly be looked at. That would certainly be looked at as part of the roads design. I think the scheme that's there at the moment works really effectively in terms of the harbour construction traffic, but as members will be aware, there is a traditional route that does see HGVs going down Victoria Road, but certainly in terms of what we would like to see for the future of our communities, absolutely we would want to try and make sure we could do everything that we could to make sure the freight traffic wasn't routed or didn't take that route.
Okay.
I do have another question, but
I think Mr. Neil maybe want to come in. Yeah.
Yeah, the only other thing I was going to pick up on is obviously the construction of the harbour access has been designed in a way to facilitate access in from the south only. So, certainly large HGVs would have severe difficulty being able to get in from the north. Doesn't mean to say that one or two might not try it, but that should help facilitate traffic coming in from the south.
Okay.
Yeah, I suppose my last question is speaking on the subject of these mitigations, would that money be potentially recoverable or paid through the monies I've previously referred to for the access route? Because we're well within the sort of global figure that was previously put forward by the Scottish Government. I think it was about 25 million. So would those mitigations potentially be chargeable to that project?
Mr. Neil?
Yeah. Yeah, I think potentially. I mean, any mitigation measures associated with that, I think, are likely to be fairly low in cost compared to the overall cost of construction of the scheme. I think if it was moved forward as part of the scheme, then it's something that we could take through the business case, certainly.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
Thank you. So can I just confirm, Mr. Neil, so any mitigation factors for the local communities during the construction phase, that we'll see that as part of the next stage of this process, is that right?
Yes, that's correct. I mean, the next stage is moving on to sort of detailed design.
Yep.
That's we start to look into the real detail of what we're going to put in place and how we're going to do it.
Yeah, okay, thanks very much. Any further questions? No, okay, can we agree the recommendations for 11.2?
Convener, I have a slight amendment to the recommendations, and if Mr. Messon could circulate Amendment A.
Okay, I'll arrange that.
Yeah, I'll be looking at that from what I've heard from Mr. Neil. I'm content to move the recommendations as they appear. I think from my point of view, what we've heard is that information that's been requested here will come back as part of the next stage anyway. So do you have a seconder, Councillor McRae? Councillor Cook, that's yourself.
Yep, that's me.
Do I have a seconder? Councillor Grant. Yep. I'm just going to simply move the recommendations as they appear in the report. I'd like to thank officers first of all for the huge amount of work that's been done to get us to this stage. I think it's there's communities in Cove and communities in Torry that will be relieved that some of the options have that were on the table before have been discounted. So I think most people will welcome that. I think some of the interventions that's being mentioned will come from the detailed design, and I don't think we should be tying officers' hands at present with those. There's a proper process we follow, and I think that's what we should continue to do. I think we've heard from Mr. Neil as well that in terms of mitigation for the local community, that will be looked at in terms of the next stage, and that'll come back to committee for us to review. So I'm happy to move those recommendations as they appear in the report. Councillor Grant.
You've summed up very well, convener. Yeah, I mean, there's nothing wrong, I think, with what Councillor McRae is seeking to do, but there's a process to be followed, and my understanding is that that's the next stage of that process, and obviously that's a very important stage in this long process. And you know, I've practical experience of the traffic management procedural machinations around this scenario and what about this option, and looking at various different ideas from community groups and local members and things from the Diamond Crossing in my ward. So it is a very, very important stage, but I think we allow the officers to, by agreeing the recommendations within the report, we allow them to carry on with that and report back. As I'd mentioned in my earlier comment to question to the officers, I think local members will have an important part to play in that, and would be eager to participate and give their ideas. So happy to support you, convener.
Thank you, Councillor McRae.
Thank you, convener. So the amendment I've put forward just formalises some of the questions and answerings that we've had there from officers. Obviously, the communities have been very concerned regarding the safety of the coast road, as well as the large goods vehicles heading through their communities. So this amendment is purely to give the community some comfort that council will be looking into these matters to protect the running of the large vehicles right the way through the heart of these communities. So yeah, we're a wee bit disappointed that we can't come to some consensus of this, since we seem to be singing from the same hymn sheet, but this would really just formalise some of the discussions that we've had this afternoon.
Okay, Councillor Cook.
Thank you, convener. Yeah, in similar vein to Councillor McRae, it is really just about formalising what we've heard. I mean, I was reassured by what officers have said, but I think it's important to send a signal to the folk in Cove, to the folk in Torry, that we are taking their concerns into account. I know officers are minded to do that, but this is just about sending a signal to say we understand your concerns in your communities. So I'm a wee bit disappointed that we can't agree on this one, particularly since later on the agenda we've got an item on active travel, which is about enhancing road safety. So I would have thought that Councillor McRae's amendment would be in line with the spirit of what we're trying to do on that one. So that's it, really.
Debate, and we want to join debate? No, okay. Well, Councillor Nicholl.
Thank you, convener. See if I can get my camera to come on. Thank you very much, convener. Obviously, going back to what Councillor Grant was saying, well, I am one of the local councillors, and I do go to the communities, and I can assure you they are seeking some reassurance here, and they are looking for positive support for their position, and that is what lay behind the idea to take this forward today. These are communities that, you know, were told there wouldn't be HGVs going to the South Harbour through residential areas, and unfortunately that has happened. Now, that's simply a fact. I'm not blaming anybody for that. There has been a problem with that in our communities, and the communities have rightly said, but we were told that wouldn't happen. Now, it has happened, and it's regrettable, and all I'm saying is that, and the way forward is for us to be given the reassurance that we are looking at these measures, we're looking at putting in junction improvements, we're looking at putting in measures as recommended by the experts in our roads department that can come up with solutions that will work in order to stop a lorry driving down a residential area where children are perhaps walking or cycling to school. I know from myself as a cyclist, I don't like when a 40-ton articulated lorry passes me. It can sometimes appear to be very close, and the road can become very narrow very quickly. I think that's a perfectly reasonable position for our communities to take. And I think that not putting in these measures will once again leave our communities in Cove and Torry absolutely dismayed that the council don't seem to listen to their concerns. Well, as a local member, I'm listening. We're trying to do something by way of reassurance and support for them. I don't think it would add anything at all to officer workloads. It's a measure that is going to have to be addressed at some point. This is the second time the administration have kicked this particular ball down the road. I really don't understand why you're not willing to grasp the nettle and tell our officers that this needs to be looked at, and we need to have solutions put in place. This fundamentally is going to be an issue of road safety, as well as the pollution aspects of having 40-ton lorries driving through our communities. Simply saying it'll happen anyway is not in any way reassuring to the people that live in these areas. This is a time where we need to show leadership, and we need to take action to give people, as I said, the reassurance and support for their very justifiable concerns. And I'm very disappointed that you have been unable to simply agree to what are manifestly sensible proposals that are coming from Councillor McRae today. Thank you.
Councillor Bolton.
Thank you, convener. I'm slightly confused because when I've looked at option 4, it's actually gone through an industrial estate, and I feel that there's almost a level of scaremongering here, and I think that's really quite distressing. I mean, if we look at the comments, which was on page 292, which said the public consultation option A4 is the only option where the overall feeling was agreement with the option as opposed to a disagreement. So, you know, I think that there's been consultation. The public, you know, you're never going to please everyone, we accept that, but I think our officers have obviously engaged really well with the community and have tried to give reassurance. And I just feel the tone of what Councillor Nichols said has been one to almost frighten people. You know, we can't stop HGVs going on any road, I don't believe, unless we get special like weight restrictions and everything. But, you know, we're at an early stage of certain parts of this process, as we've heard from Mrs. Beattie. It's a long, drawn-out tactic. Councillor Nichols' camera's popped on again. It has still got to go through quite a few things, and it's got to go back to the City Region deal. I think what we're trying to do is make sure. Sorry. Oh my. I think what we've got to make sure is we read what's in front of us, and certainly I know a lot of people that live in both Torry and Cove, and you know, I certainly wouldn't want any of them to feel, you know, that we were trying to cause a road safety issue. And I think when we get the next report back, if there's anything that we don't like or we feel that officers have missed, we'll certainly make sure that it's addressed at that stage. And I agree with you, convener. I think we have to be very careful if we start trying to act as road engineers and give our suggestions. I think we have to be followed by our officers who have done this work and have got, you know, a reasonably good support from the community for option 4. So I'll be supporting you, convener.
Thank you, Councillor Bolton. Councillor Lang.
Thank you very much, convener. Like Councillor Bolton, I'm happy to support the motion that you've put forward. I have to agree with Councillor Bolton as well. I think, you know, we had people mentioning that they were disappointed we hadn't managed to get agreement, and I think, you know, I share that, but I do feel that Councillor Nicholl's intervention into the debate has not helped matters, because it, you know, the tone of some of these remarks, you know, I think does stir up anxiety. Far from putting people's minds at rest within communities, it does the complete opposite. And I would hope that perhaps, because we are obviously recording this meeting, that, you know, people will advise those out in the community to come and have a look at the discussions that have taken place, the answers to the questions that officers gave, the clear indication from those who've asked certain questions that officers are there to provide assistance, you know, out with the committee. I know that one of the, or two of the elected members that I have that represent areas that we're talking about here have had those conversations to make sure that representations are being made on behalf of constituents, and I would hope that everybody's doing that. But as we've heard from Mr Neil and others today, the process around, I think it was Councillor Yule confirmed it because he's been on the council longer than anybody, that the process around these types of stag reports take a considerable period of time. And the reason that they do that is so that they can consider all the different aspects. Because I think what we've heard from Councillor Nicholl is that we should act today and put these measures in place right away to alleviate the concerns that people might have. But often when we take this piecemeal action, it leads, the knock-on effect is that it has a detrimental impact on something else within that scheme. And that's why we must go through the process that's outlined before us today. If we're to ask or instruct, I think it was, officers to narrow that focus now, I think we're in danger of, you know, other consequences being brought in, which are equally, if not more, impactful detrimentally to the communities. And I think we have to be very, very, you know, conscious of that and make sure that anything that we are bringing forward, you know, doesn't have that impact. And I think Councillor Grant tried to give a bit of his experience, because I know that he was very much involved within that in his community when the new bridge went in, around making sure that community voices are heard in that process. And I'm sure that him and others on the council will ensure that that's the case as this moves forward. And that's why I'm happy to support you today, because it's the right thing to do. And I certainly have been reassured by the answers I've heard from officers that they will take all of the aspects that have been raised by people here today and in the future into account as they bring these proposals forward. Thank you, convener.
Thank you, Councillor Lang. Councillor McRae.
Thank you, convener. Yeah, it's just to go on to comments in the debate. Obviously, we're not trying to, or I'm not trying to scaremonger anything here. It's simply coming from the communities that have raised it through the community councils, directed to the local elected members who have genuine concerns regarding HGVs cutting through their communities. And although I understand the road or access into the new harbour has been changed, and we welcome that, there is still the issue of some HGVs still trying to cut through areas where it shouldn't be cutting through. So in the amendment, it's not asking for anything to be put in now. It's just asking for officers to take into account the measures that the community councils and the communities themselves are seeking, and to report back into the next level of the stag. It's not asking for anything right now. It's just asking them to formalise and send a message to these communities. I take it where Councillor Bolton says that we're not road engineers. We certainly aren't. But the comment troubles me somewhat, where Councillor Bolton tried to change aspects of the AWPR at the time. So, you know, we can't on one hand be saying that we can't make changes to roads or suggest changes to roads when it comes to one community, but yet that's perfectly reasonable when it comes to somebody else's community. So I don't agree with Councillor Bolton's comment on that. So just to tie off, I am disappointed that we can't come to some agreement on this. It's basically formulating the question and answering session that we've had from officers. We're not tying any officers' hands here. We're simply asking for the change in the roads hierarchy and for the HGV weight and size limits, depending on what the officers come back with. We've done similar down in Seaton Road for that community, so there's precedent there for it to be done in other places to help other communities. So yeah, it's just really disappointing that we're having to divide on this. It's a really simple, straightforward amendment. There's nothing political in it. It's just sending a strong message to the communities that we are listening to them and we understand that we need to keep their communities safe. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McRae. Yeah, I'll start by saying, a strong message to the communities. I think came from the officers today. But we heard from Mr. Neil that before any works take place, to look at the mitigation to the local community to try and negate any impact as much as possible. So listening to Councillor Nicholl, I can only think of two things. He either doesn't understand the process or is trying to scaremonger. And it's quite clear. We've heard any members of the community should be could join, can listen to this debate after and hear what the process is, and and get assurance that things come back and come back to in front of councillors, so we can agree or make changes. So for me, what's been proposed by the SNP group today is just scaremongering. It may be politicising this whole process. I'm not quite sure. Maybe as an eye on an election in a few months' time. But I have great faith in the council officers. I think we've got a process to follow, and that's exactly what we should do. Can we go to the vote, Mr. Masson?
Thank you, Convener. The committee has before it a motion in the name of the convener and an amendment by Councillor McRae. Please vote motion or amendment. Convener?
Motion.
Vice Convener?
Motion.
Councillor Bolton?
Motion.
Councillor Cook?
Amendment.
Councillor Lang?
Motion.
Councillor McRae?
Amendment.
Councillor Nicholl?
Amendment.
Councillor Houghton?
Motion.
Councillor Yule?
Amendment.
The motion is carried by 5 votes to 4.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to 11.3, the electric vehicle
Convener,
framework for Aberdeen.
Convener, sorry, Councillor Yule here. I'd like to move a procedural motion, please.
I've moved on to 11.3. Is it in relation to that, Councillor Yule?
It's in relation to all future items on the agenda. I have checked with Mr. Masson. It is competent for me to move this.
Okay.
My procedural motion is that given that the time is now 6:24, I beg your pardon, and that this meeting has the potential to last for some considerable time to come, and given that we are now beyond the end of our staff's normal working day, and that we agree that it would be unfair to expect our staff to work into the evening on top of that normal working day, we agree to adjourn the meeting to a future date to be determined by the convener.
Okay, in fact, I guess Councillor Yule were actually, in fact, Mr. Masson, are we at the time anyway? The 6 hour. I was thinking.
No, it's 6. Yeah, the 6 hours would be 8 o'clock with the added adjournments to that as well, so that it would be 8:10.
8:10. Okay. We're just looking at the agenda. If there's anything that urgently needs to.
We need a seconder for that.
Do you have a seconder for that?
I'll second it. I think that's a totally sensible move, given all the thanks we've given to our officers today.
We move to the vote, Mr. Masson.
Thank you. The committee has before it a procedural motion by Councillor Yule. Please vote for or against the procedural motion. Convener?
Against.
Vice Convener?
Against.
Councillor Bolton? Councillor Cook?
For.
Councillor Lane,
Against.
Councillor McRae,
For.
Councillor Nicholl,
For.
Councillor Houghton,
Against.
Councillor Ewell.
For.
The procedural motion is defeated by 5 votes to 4.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to agenda item 11.3, electric vehicle framework for Aberdeen. Any questions for officers on this report? Councillor Cook.
Thank you, convener. Yeah, there is a map on page 652 of the pack, which is showing proposed locations of charge points, and most of them are understandably in the city centre, and there are 1 or 2 that are kind of further afield. Understand where that's coming from, because the more suburban you are, more likely it is that houses will have private driveway. But there are some areas, and I'm thinking in my ward, for example, of Hazelhead, where basically no one has a private driveway, yet the charge points appear to be at some distance from there. Now, there is a comment that says where there are gaps, other providers may come in, but a couple of pages earlier in the report, there is a comment to the effect that private sector providers may be reluctant to come into some areas. So just really asking officers to comment as to whether the locations in the map on page 652 are kind of set in tablets of stone, or whether as we move forward and more information emerges, because this is a framework, not a kind of detailed plan, as it were, the extent to which some of those things might be varied a bit, tweaked a bit.
Miss Beattie, can you answer that, or is someone else?
Thank you. No, I mean, as Councillor Cook has said, convener, this is a framework, and this is to give an indication of those areas that we think are those that the consultants have come back and said would be a priority area. We would always try and make sure that we could maximise any opportunities that was presented to us.
So would there be an opportunity in the future for members to contribute where there's potential gaps? And
so, I mean, we're happy to take comments as we put this out for consultation. We did get a lot of comments back. I think just in terms of moving this forward, this will it's here just now as part of the to show the work that we've done, but it will also form part of the local transport strategy. So there will be other opportunities for elected members to look at that alongside all the other transportation issues within their areas.
Thanks. I'm reassured by that. I think that's really helpful clarification. So thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Ewell.
Thanks, convener. I'm sure others like me have seen the recent media reports about further developments in EV charging, moving to potentially much faster charging. And is there any possibility, or is it possible to build in, or at least try to allow for future developments, or when putting in place infrastructure? Wouldn't want us to put in Betamax when the whole world then moves on to VHS, although obviously Betamax was better. And linked to that, we've got a number of existing points in the city already. And is it feasible to upgrade those at all, or is it a case of remove and replace?
Convener, just in terms of that first question, I think Councillor Ewell, there's only a few of us that would understand that reference between VHS and Betamax. But it is an issue just in terms of the sort of the speed of the change of the technology, and I think it's something that the framework references, and some of the discussions that have been had round about charging stations versus single charging points, the speed of that, whether or not and at some stage it'll be batteries that people take into their house to charge. These are all very current issues within the sort of the EV world. I think what we're really conscious of is that we have to be able to move forward. This is not a static position. This is a framework taking into account what we know at the moment. But absolutely, we will be keeping a very close eye on any emerging technologies. Was there another point, Councillor Yule? Sorry.
There was a thank you.
And I want to ask whether you're a VHS or a Betamax person, Councillor Yule. Councillor Nicholl?
VHS.
Thank you very much, Convener. I wonder if you could help us. How big has the market for electric vehicles grown? I seem to recall a previous committee, maybe a couple of years ago now, we did get some figures on EV vehicles registered in the city and shire. Are we seeing an exponential rise in line with national trends, or where are we on this? You know, how many, do we have any idea how many vehicles we have? Presumably we can find out from DVLA. Yeah.
Yes, I'll bring in my colleague, Mr. Simpson, in a moment, but I think it's just fair to say that the direction, you should never use direction of travel when you're talking about transport reports, but you know, the policy drivers are very much gearing us towards EV. Electric vehicles are part of the sort of decarbonisation strategy that both governments are very keen to promote. So we have to be in a place to take best advantage of that. I think it's fair to say we did look at how well the existing charging points have been used over the last year, and clearly because of the impact of COVID, they've not been as well used as previous years. But I think it's been up round about the 30,000 charge points. I'll bring in Mr. Simpson to see if he has a more detailed figure.
Thank you, Mrs. Beattie, and thank you, Councillor. Thank you, Convener, for giving me the opportunity. Yes, the Department for Transport basically publishes figures every quarter of the number of plug-in vehicles that have been sold in the UK, and it breaks it down by local authority area as well. So yeah, we've got figures that go back to 2011 all the way through to third quarter of 2020 that basically show the number of charge points that we have.
Mr. Simpson frozen again, or? Oh, no.
Oh, we're back there.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. Computer seems to be doing some strange stuff just now. Yes.
I think we didn't. I didn't think we picked up, Alan, what the number of vehicles was.
Yep. The last quarter that we had was basically up to September last year. For the DFT figures, and at that point they were saying Aberdeen City had, let me just check, it was just around sort of 620 vehicles that were registered. Now that won't take into account vehicles that have been registered to a lease company, or if you have the likes of Co-Wheels Car Club in Aberdeen, their cars are registered down in Durham, for example. So it doesn't take in all the vehicles, but we are seeing a growth every quarter based on the number of electric vehicles. And certainly when we wrote the framework, or when the consultants wrote the framework, the idea was based on the predictions for obviously phasing out petrol and diesel by 2030, based on the market and the way that people change their vehicles, they reckon that by 2030 we're going to see about 17.6% of the market, I think it was, switching over to plug-in vehicles. So even when 2030 comes along, there will still be, not everyone's going to buy electric vehicles at the same time. There will be people that will be taking a bit longer to change their vehicles, certainly. But yeah, we are seeing it grow.
Thank you very much for that, Mr. Simpson. That's really interesting. Obviously, DVLA can ID plug-in vehicles, and that's really good. But do they also identify other technologies? You know, I think some car companies have developed vehicles that every time you brake, you're effectively charging up a system, a bit like F1. obviously they don't need the same plug-in necessarily. Are we getting those kind of figures as well?
I would have to check what's available for, I suppose, hybrid and sort of more the non-plug-in hybrid vehicles. I know certainly it's been more the plug-in focus that I've been looking at, certainly, and there's the designated spreadsheet that basically breaks down those numbers. I can have a look, certainly, Councillor, and I can let you know if that information's available. Not a problem at all.
If you could, I would be most obliged. If you could just come back to me, that would be great. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay, any further questions? Nope. Can we agree the recommendations for 11.3? Councillor Cook.
I've got an amendment, convener. It is genuinely non-controversial. At least I hope so.
That could be the first one today, then, Councillor Cook.
Okay, I'll arrange for that to be shared.
Yep. Okay. I'm actually content to move the recommendations in the report. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Grant. Councillor Cook, do you have a seconder? Councillor McRae. I think what we have in the report works well. It shows our commitment to EV charging points. It talks about the initial capital investment, and it talks about and this will then go to the budget setting process as we move forward. And I think I'm content with that. Once we set our budget, then we would see if there's any additional things that we want to include at that time. But as where we are just now, I'm happy with the report, and I'm happy to endorse the recommendations that's been put in front of us. Councillor Grant.
Thank you. Yeah, just briefly to firstly thank the officers. It's a good piece of work. I'm grateful to members for some of the questions that they asked, and even more grateful to Miss Beattie for her responses, which I think offered quite a lot of comfort in that respect. Happy to support you. I think this is a big step forward for the city, big statement, and yeah, as Gail Beattie had indicated, there will be further opportunities down the line to build on this.
Sorry, I'm on mute. Councillor Cook.
Thank you, convener. I was waiting there in anticipation and thinking you'd forgotten me. I'm genuinely surprised that you can't accept this amendment. Councillor Grant said the report is great. I think you said something similar. Totally agree. I'm very happy with the report. Excellent piece of work. Very happy with the recommendations that are in there. This is a technical one, and it's to do with what we do at Planning Development Management Committee. When we are considering new developments, we can and increasingly have been putting in conditions on planning consent to require developers to put in a certain number of EV charging points. Now, the question is around how many charging points we can ask them to put in and still be reasonable. The current guidance on minimum requirements is in the supplementary guidance on transport and accessibility, which sits under the 2017 local development plan. And because that guidance is a few years old, the minimum requirement for the number of EV charging points is actually quite low. So for example, on a new housing development of 500 homes, current minimum requirement is 4 active and 4 passive charging points. That's 1.6% of 500 homes. If we're going to be looking at 17.6 or thereabout as the percentage of total traffic which is electric in 9 years' time, we need to be asking developers, requiring developers to put in a lot more than the current minimum requirement. Now, you'll have different requirements if it's a houses with drives, different requirement if it's a flatter development. So I'm not saying exactly what the number should be, but I do know for a fact that the current requirement is wholly inadequate. So it does need updated. And I'm a bit confused by your reference to the budget process, because there is no budgetary implication of this amendment. All it's doing is saying that when developer is putting in a new development, they have to put in a certain number of EV charging points, some of which could be passive, some of which could be active. I'm not specifying how many it should be. I'm not specifying whether it should be what it should be for, as I say, flatted developments, houses, commercial developments. Leave that to the officers. So I am genuinely bemused and confused as to why you don't want to take this one on board.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Cook. Councillor McRae.
Thank you, convener. Yeah, again, I echo Councillor Cook's comments. I'm a wee bit confused why we're going back to budget considerations here when this is purely a formality in terms of the tidying up of the EV framework as is. So I would have hoped that this would have been agreed with. It isn't contentious. There's nothing in this that couldn't be agreed to. It's just disappointing to see that we are again dividing over something as straightforward as implementing further EV charge points to developments in Aberdeen. If we don't put the infrastructure in place, we're never going to see our residents purchasing electric vehicles to a level that we require, especially once vehicle manufacturers worldwide are putting in deadlines of things like 2030 and 2040 to stop the manufacture of conventional engines. So it's disappointing that we can't effectively housekeep the framework that we have already with the PDMC committee to try and ensure developers are putting in the necessary EV charging points to try and increase the use of EV vehicles across the city.
Okay, Councillor Yule. Councillor Yule.
Sorry, thank you, convener. I think that Councillor Cook's amendment is eminently sensible, and I'll be supporting it. I was surprised by your comment about budgets, but since you've raised the financial implications, I would have thought that by not requiring developers to include, for example, on-street charging points where that's appropriate, there's a real risk that those will have to be, well, they will have to be retrofitted at some point, and there's a real risk that this council will have to bear some or all of those costs. So the prudent thing to do surely is to include, to do as Councillor Cook suggests, and ensure that there's a reasonable provision of charging points included with any new development. Thanks, convener.
Thanks, Councillor Yule. Councillor Bolton.
Thank you, convener. Obviously, we're going through a proposed local development plan at the moment, and officers are flat out on all of that. Now, we've seen it, many planning applications come forward, and in fact, we've seen people offering up more EV charging points. And I know that Councillor Cook has often asked that we condition it with developers, and I think we have a duty to make sure that what we're putting through goes through a discussion process with the developers to make sure they know our expectations. So I think that officers are looking at this as part of the guidance, the new proposed development plan, which I know may seem ages away, but believe it or not, it's next year it'll come into act. So I think that perhaps something may come as part of the proposed plan in the very near future. So I think perhaps we're just being a little bit too quick off the mark, and what I don't want to is distract officers from what they're already doing in terms of getting the proposed plan to us as soon as possible. So for those reasons, I completely agree. It's great to get as many EV charging points on any site, particularly where you've got platted properties. But I think what we need to do is allow the Chief Officer of the Strategic Place Planning to incorporate it with part of the proposed local development plan that she's working on at the moment.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Bolton. No one else? Councillor Cook.
Thanks, convener. Yeah.
Well, my hands up. I think you're having a delay today, convener.
Well, it's either I'm having a delay, Councillor Nicholl, or maybe you're delayed, put your hand up. But Councillor Nicholl, on you go.
Thank you very much, convener. I think really the first place I would like to go with this is to give you a quote. And the quote was, "The report shows how officers think the demand will ramp up and how it sets us forward to install more EV points. But we know we will need a lot more in the future. Now, that quote comes from yourself, and it was made in the media a couple of days ago, along with a picture of you holding on to a plug-in EV point. Now, that really encapsulates the whole point of where Councillor Cook is coming from. I don't think when you read it, you fully understood where he was coming from, and I don't think Councillor Grant did either. But it's quite clear, as Councillor Ewell has alluded to, that we are going to need more of these points. And this is a way that we can kickstart this process going forward. The current guidelines are clearly becoming outdated if they're not already actually outdated. And what we need to be doing is saying to people when they're coming forward with developments, this is one of the things you need to be actively considering. It's a no-brainer as far as I'm concerned, and I'm really surprised that once again you haven't managed to accept a very eminently sensible suggestion coming from the other side of the chamber. Very disappointing. Back to you, convener.
Thank you, Councillor Cook.
Thanks, convener. Yeah, I mean, it's largely been covered. Councillor Bolton made the point about we don't want to overburden already hard-pressed officers, and I totally agree with that. In fact, the reason the amendment is written as it is, when I put a draft and ran it by officers, I said, what is a reasonable timescale? Because I know how busy you guys are. And that's why we've got the proposal for Aberdeen planning guidance in respect of minimum requirements for EV charging points within 2 cycles. I'd actually thought something longer would be more appropriate, but officers have come back and said that's okay. And then in due course, there will be an update to the supplementary guidance on transport and accessibility, which covers a whole bunch of things in addition to EV charging points. EV charging points are just one section of that guidance. So in terms of the burden on officers, I totally agree. We shouldn't be overburdening them, but I don't think this will, because they've advised me that it won't. I reiterate, there is no budget implication. The only cost on this is going to fall on developers. It's not going to fall on the council. And then in terms of the point that both Councillor Nicholl and Councillor Ewell have made, the only way we're going to get people to buy electric cars is for them to be comfortable in knowing that there are sufficient charging points. And this is a way to do that. And you know, again, I'm just really surprised that you're reluctant to take this one on board. Councillor Bolton also made the point that, you know, we are talking to developers, and I'd say there are some very good developers out there who are going way beyond the current minimum requirements. A lot of the time out of enlightened self-interest, because what they don't want to do is put in a minimum requirement now and then realize in a few years' time, not so very long, they're going to have to backfill, they're going to have to dig up the car parks that they've got to retrofit stuff, because that's going to be much more expensive. So some developers get this. This is really targeted at the ones who don't get it and are just after a quick buck. So as I say, I'm just astonished that you can't accept the amendment, which I genuinely thought was uncontroversial.
Thank you, Councillor Cook. As I said, I'd be moving the wording in the report. You know, I feel that quite a lot of sympathy actually with this one, Councillor Cook. But for me, from what I heard from Councillor Bolton, that the correct way of doing this would be through the new LDP that's going to be with us not that far away, and it should be incorporated as part of that. I think doing it just by by piecemeal almost in changing policies is not the right way to do it. We should have a strategic approach to things, and I think that's why we have an LDP, and that's not that far away. So can we go to the vote, please, Mr. Masson?
Thank you, Convener. The committee has before it a motion in the name of the convener and an amendment by Councillor Cook. Please vote motion or amendment. Convener?
Motion.
Vice Convener?
Motion.
Councillor Bolton?
Motion.
Councillor Cook?
Amendment.
Councillor Lane?
Motion.
Councillor McRae?
Amendment.
Councillor Nicholl?
Amendment.
Councillor Houghton?
Motion.
Councillor Yule?
Amendment.
The motion is carried by 5 votes to 4.
Okay, moving on to 11.4, the Aberdeen Active Travel Action Plan. Do we have questions for officers on this one? Or I don't know if Ms. Beattie, you want to introduce this report, or do you want to go straight to questions?
No, happy just to go straight to questions and try and save some time.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for officers? Councillor Bolton.
Yeah, first of all, thank you for the report. I suppose my question is more around there's bits and pieces around the cycle, and I know that we're often, I hate to use the word driven by what money comes forward in terms of grants and initiatives from the Scottish Government, and we kind of react to that. So it's sometimes quite hard to have a kind of a long-term vision, you know, and one of the ones I suppose that we hear about a lot is obviously for cyclists, in terms of having maybe like cycle highways around the city and through the city, and we do our best with the budget we have and with the infrastructure that's currently in place. But I suppose my question is more around how can we maybe plan to have, I know that we've got the local transport strategy coming forward, but I suppose it's just about trying to maybe think more strategically for a more comprehensive cycle network, because we know that sometimes the pedestrian and the cyclist don't necessarily get on that well.
Thank you, Convener. You're absolutely right, Councillor Bolton, to reference the local transport strategy, and that is something that we are very keen to make sure that there is some map-based element to that, to try and ensure that people can see an overall strategy for these projects. I think this report is a consequence of the times that we found ourselves in, and it does allow us to at least access those funding opportunities to the best of our ability in a managed way.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any further questions? No. Okay, can we agree the recommendations in the report? Councillor Cook.
I have an amendment, Convener.
Okay.
Okay, I'll arrange for that to be shared.
Thank you, Mr. Moss. Okay, just to get things moving along, I'm content to move the recommendations as they appear in the report. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Grant, thank you. Councillor Cook, do you have a seconder? Councillor McRae, great. Firstly, you know, once again, thanking officers for all the work it's been done to bring this report to committee. It's you know, it's a huge report, a huge amount of work has been put into this, and you know, happy to agree the recommendations and the way forward that's been put forward to us. I think we have to be conscious of the amount of work that officers have at present. And you know, we have to be mindful of that, and I really think that what we have from this report is sufficient, and I'll leave it at that. Councillor Grant.
Thanks, convener. Yeah, just formally second you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Cook.
Thank you, convener. Again, this was one when I drafted it, I thought this should be non-controversial. I totally agree with you that it's an excellent report and a lot of work has gone into it. But I find it slightly strange that when Councillor Ewell moved his procedural motion to allow officers to get home or at least to stop work at a reasonable time, you didn't want to take that on board. But now you're citing the amount of work that officers have got to do as a reason for not accepting this amendment. The 2017 Active Travel Plan included an ambition to have more 20-mile-an-hour limit areas in residential areas, and that's again going to be taken forward into the new plan. Totally good, that's great. If you're a pedestrian and you're hit by a car doing 20, you have significantly better chances of survival than if you're hit by a similar car doing 30. So having 20-mile-an-hour limits in residential areas is a good idea. It won't be possible or ideal or desirable absolutely everywhere, but in a lot of residential areas, it is a good idea. Now, one of the things that prompted me to move this, to bring forward this amendment, is that I've been struggling to get some of the 20 mph signs in my ward repainted. I'm talking here about not the statutory ones, the ones which are advisory speed limits, 20's plenty. And off the top of my head, I'm thinking of Angusfield Avenue, Wood End Crescent, where the repeater signs on the road are so faded that they are almost illegible. If you know the road and you know the signs are there, you'll see them. But if you're not familiar with the area, you probably won't notice them. And when I've tried to get these signs repainted, the answer I get from the roads team is, sorry, there's no money in the budget, because we're having to focus on the statutory areas. Now, I attach absolutely no blame whatsoever to the roads team, because they've got to work with the budget that they've got. And they've got a tiny budget, an insufficient budget, because this administration in its 2019 budget cut funding for roads. The SNP budget would have maintained funding for roads. And I'm sure, as Councillor Ewell will say, I think his budget, the Lib Dem budget, would actually have increased the roads budget in 2019. But this administration cut the budget, so we don't have enough money to repaint the repeater signs on the 20 mph signs. So if we have a plan that says, let's increase the number of areas where there's a 20 mph limit, how are we going to do that if we can't even afford to maintain the ones that we've got? So what I'm asking for here is for officers to look into what it's costing us to maintain existing areas and what it might cost us and what might be feasible in terms of extending into other residential areas where there are no 20-mile-an-hour limits at present. So what, and I'm not prejudging the issue here. I'm asking the officers to make some recommendations. Might they say, actually, we should go ahead and increase the number of areas, knowing that there may be insufficient budget to maintain them, so we're spreading ourselves thin. Or they may say, well, actually, let's make the existing advisory areas into statutory ones. They may say that actually the most effective way to control speeds is to have statutory limits with engineering solutions such as sleeping policemen. I don't know what they would advise, but what I'm looking for is for them to come back with a report telling us for X amount of money, this is going to get the most bangs for our buck in terms of reducing speeds and improving traffic safety. And I agree with something that Councillor Bolton said earlier about us not second guessing officers and wanting to be roads engineers. I am entirely happy on road safety matters to be led by Vicky Ritson, Doug Ritchie, and I wouldn't want to second guess them. I would be led entirely by what they are advising. So all I'm asking for here is to get an idea of what the budgetary implications might be for improving or maintaining the areas we've got and extending the areas. And on the last agenda item, Convener, you talked about not taking decisions in a sort of piecemeal matter, but actually doing it in a strategic manner. And that is exactly what I'm looking for here. I'm asking officers to come back in a couple of months' time to say, if you're really serious about road safety, this is what you should do, and you can spend X or X plus 10% or X plus 20%, and give us a range of options to look at, which can then feed into the 2022 budget process. By which time we might know whether or not there is additional Scottish Government funding for road safety. I know Scottish Government is looking at creating a fund for road safety. Don't know when that's going to happen. Don't know how much it's going to be. But at least we can take a strategic look ahead and find out what the options might be, informed by the experts on road safety. That's all this all this amendment is looking to do. As I say, when I drafted it, I thought it would be non-controversial, but clearly in the having sat through this meeting, because it's come from this side, you're not going to accept it.
Thank you, Councillor Cook. Councillor McRae.
Thank you, Convener. Just to formally second, I don't think I can add much to the information that was eloquently put over there by Councillor Cook, but it is very disappointing again that this is a very, very straightforward amendment from the side, and it can't be accepted. It is simply, it's not asking for any budgetary commitments at the moment. It's simply asking for a report back from officers. We see across Scotland there's a number of cities, towns and villages putting in or implementing 20-mile-per-hour zones, and it's something that Aberdeen could fully grasp, and it is a shame that the committee can't accept this at the moment. It is, like Councillor Cook says, an extremely uncontroversial motion. It is very straightforward. There's no budgetary requirements at the moment. Yes, it does involve a little bit of officer time, but this is very, very straightforward, and it's a report back. Officers can come back and say, yes, this isn't feasible, or it is feasible, and we deal with it at the time. So yeah, it is very disappointing that we're again dividing over something as non-controversial as this. I would hope that following potential debate of this, members from the administration can maybe back this, and let's all move on and get together on it.
Councillor Bolton.
Thank you, Convener. Having looked at Councillor Cook's amendment, he hasn't actually put a time when it's coming back. He's obviously expecting it to come back in a few months, which will actually be after the budget setting process. And given we were poked fun at that we didn't understand budgets, but given that the money would have to be accounted for, if we want to get it done in this next financial year, we'd have to know sooner. So your next committee convener is not till May, so we would have missed that window. But I think, I would just like to say that in the term of council, the 2007 to 12, actually myself and Councillor Parkinson, we brought forward a motion to have 20 miles an hour promoted in residential areas, and the Lib Dems and SNP didn't support us to bring it forward then. So we could have been way ahead by now if we'd had support from them to introduce it for the same reasons. Now, what we find is, I mean, I've got a few 20-mile-an-hour areas in mind that I fought hard to get, but the big problem is it gives a level of expectations by residents that it's going to be policed. And unfortunately, it's not policed, and it becomes actually quite contentious. Now, I think you can tell people to drive at 20 miles an hour, and hopefully they'll reduce maybe what they were normally would do, maybe it's 30 or 40 miles an hour. But I think that we should look at this in the future, but it has to be part of a budgeted settlement or part of our budget, so that officers know. But it's not just a case of them working up a report, it's making sure they have the physical resource to have people going out. And I think Councillor Cook, I recognise this himself, because he can't get existing ones repainted. So, it's not just about the pot of paint, it's about the physical people being able to be on the ground to go and do it. So we do need to make sure that we can manage what we've got before we start introducing more, because as I say, it does lead to expectations by people. Some people like it, some people don't. And as being someone that was knocked down by a car, I know the repercussions that can give to families. But I think we have to make sure whatever we're doing, we put through the budget process rather than bringing it back after the process is complete. So I'll be supporting you, convener. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Yule.
Thank you, convener. Convener, can I first thank Councillor Cook for the very kind things he said about the Liberal Democrats' long-term commitment to investing more in our city's roads and transport network. Councillor Cook, as usual, talks much good sense. I think, and I stand to be corrected, but I think in his remarks, Councillor Cook did say that he was looking for a report back in time for things to be included in the 2022 budget, not the 2021 budget. I'm sure he'll touch on that in the summing up if I did hear him correctly. So Councillor Bolton's criticism does not hold water. Also in relation to Councillor Bolton's comments about 2012, and yes, I was there, and from memory, and I'm happy to be corrected, but I believe what she and Councillor Fackerson, or then Councillor Fackerson, proposed, it lacked something on the financial side, shall we say, which is why, rather ironically, it didn't proceed, which is often the criticism that the administration will levy at opposition. Convener, I agree with Councillor Bolton and with Councillor Cook. There should be, my view is that there should be many more 20 mph zones in our city. In fact, my view is that the default speed limit on residential roads in our city should be 20 miles an hour. In fact, I believe that should be the case across the country. But given that Councillor Cook is not proposing spending any money at this stage, and given that Councillor Cook is proposing a very modest thing, which is that we get some more information about this and what might be possible, I would be very happy to support him. I would ask in his summing up if he might accept a tiny textual change to his wording of 2, rather than saying extending 20 mph limits in the final line, if he would perhaps agree to change that to extending statutory 20 mph limits, to make it clear that we're talking about the statutory limits and not the 20's plenty, which frankly in some places is about as much use as a chocolate teapot. So convener, happy to support Councillor Cook. I think what he's proposing is modest, it's doable, and we will get the information in time for the 2022 budget process.
Thank you, Councillor Yule. Councillor Nicholl.
Thank you very much.
You're on mute, Councillor Nicholl.
Thank you very much, Convener. Once again, we divide, and we seem to divide on the strangest of things.
You're on mute again, Councillor Nicholl.
Did you hear me at the beginning, or
I can hear you now.
Thank you. Don't know what's happening with the things today. Thank you very much, Convener. Once again, we're dividing on the strangest of issues here. This is a modest suggestion that's coming from Councillor Cook, and one which I think has great merit. And I note what Councillor Ewell has said on this, and I find very difficult to find any disagreement with what he has said. I have the advantage of having been over a number of years, in fact since my son was in about P5, involved in bikeability and taking primary school children onto roads. And it's something I've had great pleasure doing, teaching them about road safety. But we've done so in an area that is a statutory 20-mile-an-hour area, and I can assure you the benefits of that are not to be given up lightly. And I'm not really sure where Councillor Bolton actually stands on the benefits of 20-mile-an-hour zones, but I certainly do find them worthwhile, and I would support them. It certainly does slow the cars down. And if we are wanting to encourage people onto alternative forms of transport, cycling, walking, whatever, but particularly cycling, I think the speed of traffic is often a restricting factor, particularly for parents that are looking to get their children onto their bikes to go to school, because they do worry about the speed of cars. And where we are slowing them down, that is a good thing, and where we're slowing them down and making it safer, all the better. I really don't see that there's any downside with this. I think it would have been something that would have come back from officers either saying it should be progressed or providing cogent reasons why it shouldn't. I think your lack of commentary when you moved against Councillor Cook's amendment and the lack of commentary from Councillor Grant speaks volumes. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Lane.
Thank you, Convener. Hopefully I'm not on mute. I was wondering for a second whether you had a button that you were able to press there, the fact that Councillor Nicholl is having such difficulties with it, but it appears to be his machine. I think it's only affecting him. Just a couple of things, because I realise that time is pushing on. I wasn't quite sure, and maybe Councillor Cook can cover this in his summing up, because in his opening remarks, and it's been backed up by his SNP colleagues, there's a concern here around speeding traffic, around safety aspects. That's the reason that they want to bring in the 20-mile-an-hour limits. He told us that he had concerns when he's tried to get ones that are already in his area, painting done to make sure that the markings are visible. So all of that, and given that and I don't disagree that I think out in the community people take some comfort from having these measures in place, but I'm a little confused about if it's such a pressing issue, why he would be willing to wait until the budget, not this budget coming, but the budget in 2022-23, in order to be bringing forward proposals. That's what surprises me. But I think probably the reasoning behind that was in something else that he mentioned about Scottish Government maybe thinking about an initiative and wanting to tag it on to that so that he can give a bit of publicity and glory to the Scottish Government, because that tends to be what the SNP do when they come into the chamber, in the council, is to make sure that they're promoting that at every turn. And so what I would say to him is, if he does have serious concerns about what's happening in the city and making sure that there's finances in the budgets to fund these types of things. And I have to say, I dispute some of the things he said in his opening remarks regarding the budgets that have been put forward by the administration, because I know we put £10 million extra into roads improvements in our capital budget a few years ago. But what I would say is, if he does have that, concerns, then I would expect to see him bringing that forward in his budget that we'll be setting in a few weeks' time. And I'm sure that others will be giving that due consideration as well. I certainly think the public wouldn't want him to be sitting waiting for another further year before he might bring those proposals forward if he's got those grave concerns. Thank you, Convener.
Thank you, Councillor Lang. Councillor Cook.
Thank you, Convener. If I just pick up Councillor Lane's last point about the urgency of dealing with these matters, where I think there is an urgent problem, or there might be an urgent problem around speeding, I always tell Police Scotland, who are, I find, always keen to hear from elected members, always keen to hear from members of the community about whether there is an apparent problem or a real problem, and they will go and investigate that. They'll take their speed cameras, and if they find there's an area where there is a speeding problem, they will go and deal with it, because dealing with speeding is a police matter. The reason for asking for a report in a couple of months' time to inform the 2022 budget setting process is because the framework document that we're being asked to look at is a 5-year plan. So there is no difference, there's no contradiction between asking the police to do something tomorrow, next week, wherever, and asking for something to enable us to look at a long-term 5-year plan. In terms of Councillor Lane's comments about the apparent commitment to the capital budget, well, repainting is revenue, it's not capital. In terms of, and I've to an extent already addressed this, Councillor Ewell was listening accurately. Councillor Bolton wasn't. I wasn't talking about this coming budget setting process in a couple of weeks' time. I was actually looking at something to inform the long-term budget process. As I say, this is a 5-year plan, so let's take our time. Let's get some informed decisions. In terms of Councillor Ewell's proposed amendment to my amendment, which is, I think, was to add the word statutory. Absolutely, what a good idea, Councillor Ewell. Wish I'd thought of it first. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cook. I'll just start by saying that, Councillor Cook, if it's, I understand that this is, you're not proposing this would be in your budget, and it's going to be set in just a few weeks' time. But if it's a big concern for you, then why not? You've as a political group, you will have the opportunity to put forward a budget in March, and if you want to allocate extra money to this, then you can do it at that point, and I'll look forward to seeing it in your budget. There was discussion about long-term investment in roads. I think it was maybe Councillor Ewell had mentioned that, or it was maybe yourself. Well, the long-term investment in our roads came in 2018 when this administration added an extra 10 million into our capital budget for roads, and no one else has put forward that at all. Yeah, I think it's a strange thing that you're bringing this up right now. I'm not quite understanding it, but as I say, if this really is a big issue for yourself, then we'll look forward to seeing it in your budget. And can we move to the vote, Mr. Masson?
Yeah, apologies. Thank you, Convener. The committee has before it a motion in the name of the convener and an amendment by Councillor Cook. Please vote motion or amendment. Convener?
Motion.
Vice Convener?
Motion.
Councillor Bolton?
Motion.
Councillor Cook?
Amendment.
Councillor Lang?
Motion.
Councillor McCrae?
Amendment.
Councillor Nicholl. Sorry, Councillor Nicholl.
Amendment.
Councillor Houghton.
Motion.
Councillor Ewell.
Amendment.
The motion is carried by 5 votes to 4.
Okay, I'm now proposing we take just a 10-minute break and we'll reconvene at 19:40, so it's a 12-minute break. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, convener.
Thank you. Just a reminder to switch off your cameras and microphones.
Okay, I'll make that 1940. So we'll continue now to agenda item 11.5. Any questions for officers on this report? No questions for officers on 11.5. Okay, I'm going to move a slight. Councillor Nicholl.
Thank you very much, Convener. It was just really to ask officers, the Appendix 1, are we seeking funding for all these projects at once, or are they in an order, or what all is happening? I wonder if there is just some commentary in and around that, if where we're going, because we've heard earlier today how you know, we don't want to commit to certain things because of uncertainties, but I wonder if we could just have some commentary, please.
Thank you, Convener. This was obviously a substantial fund that was announced to us in November. So as members will be aware, we have worked really quickly to try and encompass as many of the bus priority measures as we could. I think it's fair to say, Councillor Nicholl, that at the second stage, when we're doing the business case, there will be a lot more detail in terms of the potential order of any of the projects, but also around some of the enabling works that might need to be done for the rapid transit option. So I couldn't answer that question fully just now, but the purpose of this report is to give an outline of what the bid would contain and then allow that business case development to be done over the next year.
Thank you very much. Obviously, the business case development would then come over the next year. When would we be hoping that we could potentially be progressing some of these measures if we were successful, assuming that was happening? Do we have any indicative timescales or anything?
So that would form part of our discussion with Transport Scotland if we got the nod that our bid was likely to be successful in June. Bids have to be in by May. We have obviously been in discussion with Transport Scotland, and they've given us an undertaking that we would get some indication about the success of our bid in June this year.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay, any further questions? Not seeing anyone else. In that case, we'll.
I've got my hand up.
Councillor Yule. Councillor Yule.
Thanks. My hand's been up for a wee while. Thank you, Convener. I've just been subject to what you obviously move. I think just see this as very welcome. Particularly welcome the proposal to continue the full business cases in the Bus Alliance priority corridors, and especially the West Hill Aberdeen one, because hopefully that will lead to improved services for Kingswells, which I know, as all members know, is currently not well served by existing barely served by existing public transport, and hopefully improved links will make that route more sustainable and a better bet for the operators, and so provide better services for the residents of Kingswells. Thanks, Convener.
Thank you, Councillor Yule. Any further questions? No. Come in if I'm not seeing any hands, so come in if you're wanting to come in. Okay, no further questions. If that's the case, I am going to be moving a slight change to the recommendations, if they can just be distributed just now, Mr. Marsden.
Okay, I'll make arrangements.
Okay.
Convener, I've got a question for you. You can maybe answer. If we are looking to accelerate the city centre elements of the bid, and in particular, we're looking at South College Street and Berryden, and improve access and integration of Aberdeen bus station, would it not really be a good idea to maybe speak to the bus operators as well as part of your motion? Because they are going to either agree that it makes sense to them as businesses or not. And in fact, they may wish to make suggestions that would be useful to have in consideration of these matters. But simply keeping this in-house Aberdeen City Council, I would question whether that is totally achieving the end result.
Yeah, well, in terms of the, this bid, the Bus Alliance are part of the bid, so they would be involved in any bid which was prioritising certain areas or looking at bus stations. So they are completely entwined with this and will be part of it. Miss Beattie, I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
It was just a point of clarification for Councillor Nicholl. So the fund has to have the support of a Bus Alliance type arrangement. So although the City Council will be the bidding partner, this work has been developed by Nestrans and Aberdeenshire Council and the Bus Alliance, which includes both First and Stagecoach and a representative of the other contractors.
And do we know what their position is on, for example, the bus station that we're putting forward here, and also access into the city centre? I mean, have they given us some guidance as to what their position is on these matters?
Convener, with your indulgence, I'll just come back in. So the issue of the city centre, and particularly the access and egress from the bus station, has been a long-held issue by the bus companies, in particular Stagecoach. So I wouldn't envisage that this would cause them any difficulties whatsoever. But once this report has been agreed or approved, then that will go back to the Bus Alliance to discuss.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Yule, did you have a question?
I did indeed, Convener. But I am hesitant to ask it in public. It's in relation to potential enabling works on South College Street. If you want me to ask it, I will ask it, but I'm hesitant to do so in public.
Well, that would be your call, Councillor.
Well,
whether you feel it's.
Well, I suppose what I'm asking then, Convener, is can we go into confidence so that I can ask it?
Mr. Masson, can we pause recording?
Yeah, we can halt the recording. I'll just